Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, good evening. My name is Greg Batista, and I am joined with Andrew Fuchsa, and we're going to be doing this webinar called Averting Disaster at Your Building. Okay, we're going to be going over these slides, and at the end, of course, we're going to have a Q&A session. So let's go over an introduction to this webinar. Now, for starters, let's find out who this webinar is for, because I did this webinar because there's a lot of people that have called me after this whole Surfside tragedy, and they're freaking out and saying, what am I doing with my building? Can I still live in my place? And people are concerned. So this webinar is especially for those residents that have been calling and calling. And I told myself, look, we got to do something here to allay those fears of those people that live in these buildings. So it's for residents, it's for board members that live in condos that are in charge of doing all the decisions, of making all the decisions that a board requires to keep the people safe and the area maintained, et cetera, et cetera. So this is also for people who are looking to make a purchase and a condo property, and especially for property managers also. These property managers, they're the people that are in charge of making sure that all the bills are paid, that the place is maintained, and they have a very complicated job as far as knowing the laws and the rules and making sure that you have a safe environment for all the residents. And of course, and if you don't live in a condo, then you have these buildings that are owned by commercial owners, where you have office buildings, et cetera. That is who this webinar is basically for. It's very basic, very fundamental, and it's for those people that don't have a big technical background. Now, who this webinar is not for, it's like I said, people that do not have this technical background, such as design professionals and general contractors. These people do this kind of stuff every day, like me, like Andy. This webinar is not for people like us, and also for building inspectors and other technical people that deal with buildings. Continuing on, as an introduction to this webinar, we're going to be doing a Q&A, and we're also going to be live in our chat, so you can find out what we're talking about. You can also ask questions. Now, if you look at the arrows that are at the bottom of the screen, you can see that there is a button called Chats and a button that says Q&A. And again, at the end, we're going to answer some of these questions, and hopefully we'll be able to get to all of them. So as we talk, feel free to ask your questions. Now, why is this topic so important? Now, first of all, we owe it to those people who died at Surfside. Now, throughout the entire history of engineering and construction, people have been building buildings, and these buildings have failed in some form. And little by little, we go and we learn from the past. Even the people that built the pyramids, when there's history that says that they built the pyramids first at a certain angle, then they built them at another angle until they got to the perfect angle, which is those pyramids that you see at Giza. And little by little, for thousands of years, we've been developing, and little by little, we learn from our mistakes. So it's all about safety, and that's what basically the code is for. The code and the laws are there to provide safety to those people that live in these buildings. Now, basically, what are we going to cover? The basics right now is why is a building so complicated? Some people, they look at a building and say, oh, that's just a bunch of hunk of concrete. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. Although the concrete part is just a portion of this complicated thing that's a building. Now, to me, it's like a human body, and I explain it like that a lot to my clients. You have electrical system, which are your nerves. You have plumbing. You have your skin. You have all sorts of different systems that are working together. And once one of those systems fails, then it tends to be a domino effect, and other things can fail along with it. So yes, buildings are complicated. They need maintenance. They need care, just like our own bodies need care. They need doctors when something goes wrong. And that's extremely important. And that's going to be part of the theme that we're going to be talking about in this webinar. So should I be worried about my building? The answer is twofold. It's yes and no. On the yes side, obviously, it's a safety issue. Nobody should have to walk into a building here in the United States of America and say, oh my God, is this building going to fall? Or be worried that something's going to fall on their head. So yes, it's a safety issue. But on the other hand, it's no. That should all you worried about my building? You shouldn't be worried about the building, because there are professionals at work that it is their jobs to make sure that these buildings are safe. And there's a bunch of people. There's the building officials and the inspectors at the city. That's all that they do. They make sure that the contractors are doing what they're supposed to be doing, the architects and the maintenance people, then that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. They are at the top of the heap as far as making sure that everything's done. You have engineers such as myself that do the plans, that do the construction, and you have inspectors, you have architects, and you have your maintenance people. A lot of these buildings have a full-time maintenance person, and these people are really at the front line of making sure that everything is running okay. And if they see something, if they have enough experience and are good enough, if they see something, then they're the first ones to sound the alarm. And then they're the ones that call the engineers or call the building department and make sure that these things are repaired. So there is a whole system that is set up in Florida law that and the statutes that requires that things are looked at in a timely manner. So going on, so now we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about in this particular webinar. And for discussion, we're going to discuss what occurred at Surfside. At least we're going to theorize what happened, because right now we're in the middle of engineers and other people looking into what exactly happened here. Because if we don't know, then we're not going to be able to learn from those mistakes. But from my vantage point, from what I've seen and my experience, I'll be able to talk a little bit about what happened there and how that affects us. We're also going to talk about the 3 biggest problems in buildings. Now, in buildings, a million things can happen, but in my 30 years of experience, there's these 3 big ones that happen in condos in South Florida, and we will touch upon those 3 because those three different issues take up 90% of what happens on condominiums, and that's what causes the biggest problems. The other thing is, why do we have these problems? We're going to be talking about why those problems occur, and in understanding why those problems occur, we can get into how to fix them. The next thing is, what can we do to avoid these problems? This is probably the most important thing of this webinar is once you understand, once you're able to analyze, once you're able to identify these issues, then what can we do to avoid them? The other thing is how to protect yourself. And that's why Andy is with me here in this webinar, because as an attorney, a very experienced attorney, dealing with insurance issues and catastrophes, he is one of a kind guy. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to talk a little bit more about his background in a couple of slides. And his background is in insurance. And then at the end, of course, like I said, we're going to have the Q&A session at the end. So again, hit the button on the bottom that says Q&A and feel free to ask your questions. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I've been a structural engineer, licensed structural engineer for 30 years, licensed in Texas, in Florida, and in Puerto Rico. What's unique about me is I've worked for a company called Turner Construction and Opus South Corporation and John Moriarty Associates, and I've built these buildings. I've built high-rise buildings in South Florida. I know how they're put together. And not only that, but I also have my design company, which we've designed many, many, many projects and many buildings. So what I bring to the table here is I'm both an engineer, designing buildings, and I've also been a contractor, and I still am a contractor. And I'm a president and founder of Batista Engineering and Construction, which we just celebrate this year, 20 years of being in business. And we specialize in existing buildings and in concrete and structural repairs. That's our specialty. And I've also been on the Broward County Board of Unsafe Structures and GBEC, which is the acronym for Batista Engineering and Construction. We've performed hundreds of 40-year recertifications throughout South Florida. Now, moving on to Mr. Andy Fuchsa. I don't know, I always call him Andy, but officially he's Andrew. What do you prefer, Andrew?
You can call me Andy, that's fine.
Okay, Andy. Andy is a partner at Geyer Fuchs Tyler Law Firm, and he specializes in property damage claims. He's worked on over 500 cases in damage claims against insurance companies. And prior to becoming an attorney, Mr. Fuchs owned and operated a large public insurance adjusting firm, Epic Group, as well as being a contractor specializing in property damage restoration projects. So Andy is very unique. We're actually very lucky to have him because not only has he been an attorney, but the type of background that he has is actually very unique. He owned his own insurance adjusting firm, and he's been a general contractor. And a lot of times when I'm talking to Andy, you know, we start talking the construction lingo and the engineering lingo back and forth, and he's comfortable with that. And we're, like I said, we're very lucky to have Andy with us.
By the way, Greg, it's 5,000, not 500.
5,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I have to talk to. I have to talk
just to clear that up. Anyway, just go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's a good interruption, Andy. 5,000. All right. So let's go in a little bit into the Surfside collapse. I'm just going to talk a little bit about it, just to give you a little background to the extent that we're going to be talking about things that happen that we can look at and avoid that happening in our buildings. So right now we have I'm sure many of you have seen the video where the building collapsed. I'm going to scroll through this so you can see something happened here in this collapse down here. The slab, the initial slab at the bottom gave way somehow, and there was a weakness there. And that was the first domino that caused the rest of the building to come down. Now, right now, we and other engineers were looking into what happened here. So if you look at this parking level under the pool deck, you'll see that there are columns holding up this pool deck. And there was corrosion. There's corrosion in this entire pool deck. And what's holding up this pool deck, as you can see on my mouse, they can see my mouse, right? No, okay. Well, as you can see, there are columns holding up that red slab. And one of the reasons that this failed was that there was what we call punching shear. And if you look at my hands, you have a slab and you have a column supporting that slab. And if you press your finger hard enough against your hand, it's going to go through, right? So the same thing basically happened. If my tip of my finger is not glued very sturdy to this slab, then what's going to happen is this punching shear, it's just going to go through. Okay, that's technical jargon for this punching. So let's continue this video. You see, it says punch through failure at the column, and it starts to collapse. And there's a reason why this punching shear happened. And we can talk about the design, that it wasn't designed correctly or it wasn't designed up to the standards that are today's standards. And that's obvious because the code today is much more stringent than it was back then. So maybe it was a confluence of the design issue, that instead of maybe having 10 rebars holding that together, maybe back then only 3 were required. But the thing is that even in the report that was by the other engineer, he mentioned there was a lot of spalling. There was a lot of spalling in the slab, which is a deterioration of the steel inside the concrete. We'll talk about that a little later. But when that point of contact weakens, this is what you get, and you see the little piece of column pointing up through the slab, and that is the first domino. Again, just for clarity, I'm going to say that to me, this is the most likely scenario of what happened, and we still have to wait until the experts that are actually there on site sifting through all the rubble, they can come back and confirm this. Okay, so continuing with the video, you'll see that there's multiple punch throughs. And the reason we know that is that there's pictures of the punch through. Now you can see that as the slab, the red area collapses, the rest of the building collapsed behind it. Okay? Now, why am I saying this? You can see that you have the walls, you can have the punching shear, you have the punching shear at the slab. You see where the slab failure line at the bottom and the slab failure line at the top. And then you can see where inside the orange circles, you can see where the columns are still up. The columns are still up, and the slab is punched through. The column is punched through the slab. Okay, the reason I'm showing this video is that there was a weakness, and the weakness, if you look at the report from the engineer that was there, you can see there was widespread deterioration of the concrete. Now, we're going to get into the three biggest issues, and like I just said, the number one issue is the concrete / structural degradation, and it's the rusting and the spalling of the concrete. Now, if you look at this video, this is actually on a project that I did maybe about 6 years ago that shows there's a lot of deterioration happening here, and this is next to the ocean. And if you have a building next to the ocean, you're going to get a lot of rusting of the steel. Even like the pipes that you see there, those are sprinkler pipes, and they are extremely rusted. So imagine if you have a piece of steel inside a piece of concrete, and that starts to spall, that starts to corrode. It's going to expand, and what you're going to see here is you're going to see what a spall is. That is a spall, where the steel, that dark piece that you see in there, that is a piece of steel. And once it starts to corrode, it expands, and it can expand up to 7 times its original volume. So imagine you have a piece of steel and expands 7 times, of course the concrete's going to break. And in the concrete breaking, it just debilitates the structure. So I'm going to show you what this kind of thing looks like. And this is very telltale. If you see a small crack where that orange dot is, and you see it coming out a little bit, that is a spall. That's the classic spall. The thing about these spalls is that, no, it looks like nothing's going to happen there. But when you take a hammer to it, you see how easy that thing comes apart? And if left untreated, those pieces fall by themselves eventually, and they can damage property, they can damage cars if in a garage, and it can even hurt somebody or even kill them, because some of these pieces of concrete that fall, they're quite large, and you get one of these things on, a 10-story building, it could easily kill somebody. So, and there's a whole method to repairing this. Now, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but we'll talk about that in a bit. You can see that in the Sun Sentinel, there was a building, a hotel, that actually collapsed the balcony. You can see it right there. There was another condo in Lauderdale by the Sea where the catwalks fell, and you can see all the steel that's just hanging there. You can see it. It's all corroded. The picture doesn't have to have a lot of resolution, because you can see it's automatically, you can see rusted. Now, continuing on. Now you can see this catwalk. You can see the orange circle where the catwalk used to be, completely down, completely collapsed, and it was because the steel was not holding it up and it was corroded. There's yet another collapse. So the very basic process, if you have spalling like this, is that you need to hire an engineer who's going to go and he's going to identify, is going to classify and document in the plans. You get those plans and you submit them, they get approved for repairs, and then you repair them. I can talk for a couple of hours about that, and it's not within the scope of this, but there is a whole complicated process of repairing these things. I've seen time and time again where you have people who don't know how to repair these things, and they put a handyman to put some schmutz on the wall or on the column, and it just doesn't work. There's a very specific scientific and engineering method to having these things repaired, and this is why I wrote a book called G. Batista's 1-Hour Guide to Concrete Repair. I wrote this book probably about 10 years ago, and it's in its second edition. Now, I am giving all of you a free copy of this guide, and we have all your emails. We're going to be sending you a link that you can download all 4 copies of this book. But this is the most important one. This is the This is the one. It's 35 pages long. I have a copy of it right here. And it basically talks about the, what you're supposed to do, what the cost is. It gives a step-by-step. It's in full color. It gives you checklists on how to choose your engineer. And it's very user-friendly, and it's made for property managers and for people who are concerned, for board members who are not necessarily engineers. And it's a very simple, easy step-by-step process. Let's go to the second biggest issue in buildings in South Florida, and that is moisture and water intrusion. If you live in South Florida in a condo, you know what I'm talking about. You've got mold, you've got wood rot, insects, spalling, tile issues, etc. And the typical origins are going to be in your roof. Of course, that's by far the number one, roofs. And with all these hurricanes going by, the roofs get weakened. And it's a maintenance thing. It's got to go on and on. I can talk about roofs here for 3 hours straight. But if you have questions, again, you can go to askgbatista.com or call me. Your typical origins are, like I said, roof. You have expansion joints in buildings. You have the water can come in through buildings, doors, louvers, vents, and also through the paint, especially on old paint jobs where it's cracked and it's worn. So right now, I'm going to show you this video that's basically going to show what I was talking about. You've got mold in buildings, and the mold, you can see it here. A lot of times, this black mold is dangerous, and once you take down a wall, you can see that the mold is inside that wall. And you can, from the outside, it's perfect, but inside, it's got mold. And again, that's another one where you break the wall open and you've got mold inside. The next one is wood rot. Wood rot is another one of those things where you don't see it. You don't see it until it's too late, because that's hidden behind blocks. It's hidden behind drywall. And a lot of times it's too late because, you're walking on your floor and it collapses or partially collapses. So again, that's another thing where water intrusion. This thing is not cooperating. Hold on. Where are we? Wood rot. This is wood rot and insects. I mean, this is these two pieces of wood are what's holding up a floor slab, and that's the walkway that's on top of a floor where you walk on. So if you have that piece of wood where you have that pencil going through it, and it's sustaining and it's holding up where you're walking, it can easily collapse. This is more spalling. Now this is a really bad, this section here is really bad. You can see widespread spalling in this slide. Also, if you have a lot of moisture in your house, the tile can come loose. And I know you've seen, if you look at this picture, some of you might say, oh, wait a minute, I've seen this before. And when your tiles come loose, you step on it and it cracks. On your roofs have to be maintained. Roofs are very complicated in and of themselves. You have water that's ponding in a corner, you're gonna have problems down the road. So yes, you have roofs, you have more ponding water. The roof, sometimes they have damage or it was wrongly installed, and you get this type of thing where the contractor didn't do a great job of adhering the different plies down. Now you have expansion joints. And when I say expansion joints, some of you are asking what an expansion joint is. I'm sure that you've seen when you're looking at a building, sometimes you see this plate that's on the floor or on a wall. And that's basically an expansion joint, where on one side of that joint is the building, and on the other side of the joint is the other half of the building. It's actually two different buildings. That joint just allows the two buildings to move independently of each other. So a lot of times water can seep into those expansion joints. A lot of times when you look at bridges, on bridges, you also have expansion joints. You have those two pieces that are together. Now, if that expansion joint fails, of course, you're going to get water coming in through that expansion joint. And a lot of times you have waterproofers, you have roofers who specialize in these kind of things. And there's a lot of different ways that you can repair expansion joints. And expansion joints is just one more of those things that you have to upkeep, you have to maintain. If you keep it there too long, it's going to weather and it's going to fail. And that's another one. I'm sure that you've seen this on walkways or on buildings where you're basically it's just failed. It's just old. And these things, after being in the sun for a lot of time, they just crack like you would have at your windows. That's a perfect example right there of a failed caulking that is at your window or at your door. Once you see that, you should just replace it. Because once the water gets into there, it's going to damage your drywall. It's going to get mold. And definitely a stitch in time saves 9. A lot of people don't want to spend a lot of money up front. And then what's going to happen is they're going to spend 10 times more in a couple of years and have to replace the window and have to replace drywall instead of just replacing the caulking when you do it ahead of time. And caulking is really very cheap and anybody can do it. Just like that slide that's there. And paint, to me, the most important thing. Okay, I just got a question, so we'll keep that for the end. One of the more important things is painting. And as you can see here, when paint starts to peel, starts to crack, it's just old. You don't want to spend more money on painting and your building hasn't been painted in 10 or 20 years. You're going to get this kind of peeling. What's going to happen? Water's going to get inside. Moisture's going to get inside. You're going to get mold, rot, peeling, and even spalling. And again, when you have a building that's painted, the painters go through and they actually repair those cracks that you see. So right now, let's say that building is not painted in 5 years or 10 years. Water is going to get inside that crack. And when water gets inside that crack, it's going to cause all those host of problems that we've been talking about. So if I were to name the #1 culprit of buildings having issues, is them not being properly maintained through painting. And there's another example of cracking that happens on buildings where paint is. Okay, now we're going to the next slide. Why do we have these problems? The first one, like I mentioned, is lack of maintenance. And that's by far the most prevalent and important item is lack of maintenance. Now, of course, you're going to have wear and tear. And that's like anybody. I mean, as you grow old, you're gonna go to the hospital more, and you're gonna have more checkups. So it's like, and I always say that your building is like a human body. If you don't take care of it, if you don't do the maintenance, if you don't get checkups, you're going to break down. You're going to break down. And to me, paint is the most important thing. You also have wear and tear on electrical and plumbing systems. And another thing on wear and tear is that the lack of maintenance is if you have a personnel, or you don't even have personnel. A lot of these buildings don't even have maintenance people when it would be good to have them. Of course, it comes down to money. But again, for those of you who are listening to me, by far, you need to maintain your buildings, and you can hire any engineer, you can hire any architect, somebody who knows about buildings to have an inspection done and can lead you in the right direction. So you won't have to be spending $100 down the road when today you only have to spend $2. And also another thing on lack of maintenance is people tend to kick the can down the road. And I've been confronted with many boards, many people saying, look, we don't want to pay for this. We don't have the money. Well, we can't apply for a loan because we're not going to get approved for a loan. Or they just don't care. It's a combination of a lot of those things. But those are things that if you have a building and those board members really want to do the right thing, then they should seriously seek the help of professionals such as myself or other professionals that would help them. The next one is when things are done, they are done wrongly. Now, there's a reason why permits have to be pulled. And everybody knows in South Florida that it's really a pain in the butt to pull a permit. Let's be real. But it's a pain in the butt on purpose because things have to be done correctly. Because if you do something without a permit and you don't do it correctly, chances are that it's not done to code. And if it's not done to code, it's a problem because the code is there for safety. Okay, so again, it's about hiring the right professionals, hiring the right people to do the right thing and doing things in a right way, designing them in a right way, and also constructing them in the right way. So again, I can't stress that enough. Hiring the right professionals is important. And so guess what I have for you? I have more books. And again, these I'm giving out for free. One is called Hiring an Engineer. And Hiring an Engineer, the concrete repair. Actually, I don't have it. Well, anyway, all these books are for free. Now, Hiring an Engineer, if you need to hire an engineer, you need to ask yourself several questions. What are the steps? How can I best hire the engineer so that we compare apples to apples on the bids? After you hire their engineer, now what? So these are the type of basic questions and answers that I provide you so that you can do the right thing and hire the right person so that they can give you the right answers and the right product. Also, we have hiring an owner's representative, which again, a lot of boards do not have, and a lot of condos do not have somebody that knows about construction, that knows about engineering, that will protect their interests. Now, this doesn't apply to these small little jobs. These apply to big jobs, $1 million, $2 million. And this is a very important step, to hire an owner's representative, which is a person like myself, like many others that are out there, that guard your interests, and they make sure that you're doing the right thing and protect the interests of the condo association. So again, we're gonna send you a link. We already have your emails. We'll be sending a link out so you can download these guides for free. Now, how can we avoid these problems? First, I've said it to everybody, because after Surfside happened, I would get a lot of phone calls, people absolutely freaking out saying, my building's gonna fall, please come over, we need to get this checked, I see a crack on the wall. You have to understand that there are many things in place to ensure that the construction goes well. When a building gets built, you have a professional, you have an architect, you have an engineer that does the design. Once you get the plans done, you have a professional, a general contractor that hopefully has been doing this for many years, and he's another layer of professionalism that goes into making sure that the things are done correctly. Once the contractor starts building, you have the building department. The building department is key in making sure that everything is running smoothly on the construction side. You have the building officials, you have the inspectors, you have all those great folks that are there at the building departments. And a lot of people like to complain about the building departments, but it's been my experience that the vast majority of these building departments have your best interests in mind, because they're looking after your safety and they want to do things according to the building code. So after this building starts getting built, you have the special inspectors, you have threshold inspectors. So there's those many layers to make sure that everything is running smoothly. But at the end of the day, if you think that there is something that is wrong with your building, there's people that you can call. You can call attorneys, you can call engineers and architects, and those people will steer you in the right way. Now, the other thing is, when buying, hire the right professionals. I assume that everybody that's on this webinar are people who actually live in a building or have an interest in somewhere where they live now, that's existing. But this also goes out to those who are looking to purchase. Again, when you're looking to purchase, you hire the right professionals. You hire home inspectors to go out and take a look at these things. You have a real estate agent who knows the ins and outs of making sure that either there's a 40-year certification on the building, that there's that the reserve study is okay, and if there's any planned assessments, and the list goes on and on. Real estate agents, if you're looking to buy, get somebody that's experienced, that knows the ins and outs of condominiums. They're absolutely key. I briefly mentioned reserve studies. Reserve studies, and I'm going to read this off of a Wikipedia website that I saw. It says, a reserve study is a long-term capital budget planning tool which identifies the current status of the reserve fund and a stable and equitable funding plan to offset ongoing deterioration, resulting in sufficient funds when those anticipated major common area expenditures actually occur. That's a long-winded explanation sentence to say basically a reserve study basically gives you the health of your finances. So if I'm going to buy a condo and I say, let me see your reserve study, and it says that you have 0 reserves, that means that you don't have money in case a big project comes along. You have 0 money, and they're going to have to put in assessments. So if you're paying $200 a month in your homeowners association fees, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get clocked with additional charges. These reserve studies, they're made so that you can understand what kind of money is going to be spent and the lifespan of the building so that you can plan for it in the future. That's why it's a long-term capital budget planning system. I can talk about reserve studies here all day long. I've done reserve studies, but it's smart that if you're a homeowner, it'll be in your best interest to go and see what your reserve study says. Another thing to avoid these problems is performing your inspections. There's lots of different inspections that happen on buildings. It's not just a 40-year certification. There's performing the fire inspections. Fire department comes by periodically on buildings. They check your fire extinguishers, your fire sprinklers. You got city inspectors that come. Elevators get inspected. When you go inside your elevator and you see a plaque on the wall that says inspected by such and such, that means your elevators have been inspected. There's mechanical inspections. There's roofing inspections. When you have a roof that's completed, maybe you signed on to your contract that says that you have to have a periodic inspection done. There's all sorts of inspections that happen on buildings. And I would say that it's key to get a good property manager that knows the ins and outs, because they are the ones that can lead you the right way in not only understanding what's going on in your building, but being also able to hire the right professionals. And now we have 40-year recertifications. We've been doing 40-year recertifications for years, and we've done hundreds and hundreds of these. And a lot of people are knowing right now what a 40-year recertification is because of what happened at Surfside. But these are very good. This is a great tool that when the building turns 40 years old, an engineer or architect has to come in and perform a complete inspection top to bottom of the building. This is a great tool, and hopefully maybe with this mishap with this tragedy at Surfside, maybe they will require 40-year certifications to be done at 20 years or 30 years. That's not up to me. That's up to other people that are going to be looking into in detail what has occurred, and maybe we can learn from these lessons. And guess what I have for you? I have yet another book. It's called 40-Year Recertifications. Again, this book is made for people who don't understand the system. It's basic. It goes from A to Z as far as the steps to be taken, and it's in full color. And it's a very helpful tool for you to be able to understand the 40-year certifications, how they work. It leads you through the process and tells you things that that will help you not to be taken advantage of different people, different professionals that are out there, and it'll guide you in the right way. So again, these books, we will send everybody a link where they can download the books for free. Now we continue. Again, going on the lines of hiring the right professional. How do you protect yourself with the right insurance? I'm going to now pass this on to Andrew Fuchsa. Take it away, Andy.
Hi there. So Greg asked me to talk a little bit about insurance, and I want to make sure you guys can see my screen. And he said, look, we want to not only avert disaster, but we want to avert a disaster after disaster. So many times when you have a claim or a problem with the building, sometimes you have some problems with the insurance. So my name is Andy Fuchsa. I'm with the firm Geyer Fuchsa Tyler. We have several offices, Broward, Dade, and Palm Beach, and we work statewide with consumers, helping them with their property insurance claims. So let me start by just talking a little bit about insurance policies. Most of these condominium policies, like the ones for the Surfside condominium building that collapsed, and many of the condominium buildings that we see are written under what's called an all risk policy. And for those of you that don't know, an all risk policy is a policy that basically covers everything unless it's specifically excluded or limited. And most of the common causes of loss or damage to these buildings are from hurricanes, water damage, and fire. So up on the screen is the excerpt from a policy. It's a condominium association coverage form. And if you read it, if you start reading it from front to back, it talks about coverage. We will pay for direct physical loss of or damage to covered property at the premises described in the declarations caused by or resulting from any covered cause of loss. So you say, well, what are the covered causes of losses? Okay, great. You go through the policy a little further and you come upon a section that says cause of loss, special form. And that's the section of the policy that would identify what losses are covered and which is all of them, and more specifically, what is excluded. So everything is covered unless it's excluded under an all risk policy. And those are, again, are the most common policies that we see in these condominium and commercial buildings here in South Florida and throughout the state. So you go through and then they start identifying certain exclusions. So for example, exclusions for earth movement and governmental action, A, B, C, D. You start going through all of these exclusions saying if your loss or damage is covered by one of these particular items, there is no coverage for that particular claim. When you get to K, as you're going through the exclusions, you get to one called collapse. And I just want to touch on that particular exclusion because it's kind of an interesting exclusion in most of these policies. And it kind of shows how these insurance claims can be a little bit tricky. So first and foremost, under these ISO or these standardized policies, right off the bat, when you're reading the policy from left to right, you find that collapse, meaning an abrupt falling down or caving in of a building or a part of a building, is excluded. It says, most commercial condominium policies, first and foremost, they exclude damage caused by collapse under the all risk section of the policy. And you think, wow, this is not too good a thing. You keep reading, you keep flipping forward, and you go through the policy, and these policies are sometimes 70, 80, 90 pages. You look at another section that says additional coverage, collapse. So the policies that, first they exclude it, then they put it back in with certain limitations. And, the policies, most of the time they read that if you have a collapse, it is covered if and only if it's covered by certain, it was caused by certain things. So there's certain parameters that have to cause the collapse for it to be covered. And generally speaking, it deals with the knowledge that the insured had of the building. If you look at the policy, it's, it states that, the policy would cover collapse if it was caused by one of the more of the following. And the first one, it talks about decay that is hidden from view. And this is the important part, unless the presence of such decay was known to the insured prior to the collapse. And then if you look at B, it talks also about vermin damage. The collapse is caused because, for example, termites is very common. If it was caused by some termite damage or some rust or decay or deterioration, much like those pictures that Greg was showing earlier, if that's what caused the collapse, it's typically covered if and only if the association or the insured was unaware of that problem. And then it goes on and talks about other parameters of the collapse, and it defines what collapse is. So it's kind of an interesting thing with when you have these cases, and especially after the Surfside collapse, our law firm got flooded with calls like, hey, if that were to happen to us, is it covered? And the typical response was, well, it depends. Were you aware of a problem? Were you aware of deterioration and decay? Were you aware of these hazardous conditions? Because that could preclude you from being able to to get your claim covered under the collapse provision of the policy. And if you keep flipping forward a little further in the policy, there's another section that says, well, what collapse doesn't apply to? So it talks about a building or any part of a building that is in danger of falling down or caving in. So what happens is what it constitutes a collapse or not. And we've had a lot of cases where we have like a ceiling that falls down or a balcony that's kind of teetering on coming off the building. At what point does a policy define collapse as a covered loss? And that's really something that's somewhat subjective because there's a lot of moving parts in the analysis. And the reason that I'm bringing this up and going through this this analysis of this particular policy is because the truth of the matter is that you should hire a claims expert, an attorney or an adjuster that specializes in this area of insurance, in property damage claims, whether it be a seasoned public adjuster or a seasoned attorney that understands how the policy works and can apply the facts, in your case, in the most favorable light to be able to obtain insurance coverage for you. Doing it on your own without a lot of experience is usually not recommended because you could really mischaracterize things in an inadvertent manner. And when you're presenting the claim, not present it the right way, and then all of a sudden you make it a lot more difficult for coverage to be afforded. So how do insurance companies avoid paying out on these claims? You know, because we get called a lot of times after an insured, a condominium, a property owner submits their claim for collapse or fire, water damage, windstorm, and they get either a denial or an underpayment. So what are the top 10 things that hurt associations and consumers when presenting a claim, which in turn becomes their second disaster? The first thing is insurance companies typically look at the damage being caused or being claimed rather, and say that it's a pre-existing condition predating the loss. So we've had a lot of collapse claims and where a section of the building is falling or coming off, and the association makes the claim for collapse or the damage that was sustained, and the association comes back, the insurance company comes back and says, well, this is predating, this is a long-term problem that you were aware of, and this is consequently not covered under your policy. Another typical denial or basis for denial is misidentifying the scope of repairs. Once an insurance company does agree to pay, what and how things have to be paid is often disputed, or have to be repaired is often disputed. You know, do you have to fix a little bit of it? Do you have to fix a lot? And how much it's going to cost? Which is the third reason, undervaluing the cost of repairs. It has been our experience that many times insurance companies are not willing, because they're obviously, looking out for their bottom line, to necessarily pay what the consumer is wanting for the necessary repairs. And in those cases, it's also always a really good idea to hire a professional, like a lawyer or an adjuster, to help you recover what you're really entitled to be able to properly quantify that damage. Now, one of the things that insurance companies also do when you make a claim is that they impose significant post-loss obligations. Every insurance policy has a lot of obligations on the consumer when it comes to a claim, like the things that you have to do after, sitting for examination under oath, providing certain documents, allowing a number of inspections, and those could be very taxing on a consumer, on an insured. It's always best to have an attorney or a seasoned claim expert, or a public adjuster, if you will, or a person with a lot of experience in claims to help you walk through that process. A lot of times an insurance company will mischaracterize the cause of loss to be excluded. Whether, if you have a section of the ceiling falling down and say, oh, well, this is caused by termites. Well, yeah, it might have been caused by termites, but the collapse is covered. The collapse was covered because termites that are hidden from view, that you have no idea that's causing the deterioration and decay, that would be covered. So it's how you phrase the particular, or how you present the claim rather, has a profound effect on whether you're able to recover or not. Sometimes an insurance company will allege a fraud or misrepresentation as a basis for denying the claim, saying, hey, you were paid for this before in a prior claim, or you were paid monies for Hurricane Andrew or Hurricane Wilma, and you didn't appropriate those monies the right way. Now you're making a claim that's duplicative, and therefore that's not covered. Usually an attorney can help you with that so that it's not presented as a fraud, but there's a reasonable basis and explanation on how to present that claim in a proper manner. Sometimes an insurance company will say that the damage falls outside the statute. The condominium buildings, for example, some of the property belongs to the unit owners, and some of the property, which is the common elements, belong to the association. And the statutes are really what guide and determine who owns what and what is covered under the association's policy versus what's covered under the unit owner policy. There's also this wind-driven rain exclusion, which is kind of interesting. A lot of times, we have a hurricane or a big storm and water comes in the building. What Greg was talking about, how detrimental that could be to a property. If typically if the wind creates an opening in the building and the water gets in, that would be covered. And I've had videos, there's kind of interesting videos of a unit owner inside with a camera, and there's a big storm like a Hurricane Irma or whatever, and you could see the sliding glass doors bowing and flexing, creating that opening for the water to come in. Then the wind subsides, and then the building it appears that there's no opening anymore. So with that video that was taken during the storm, we were able to show, hey, look, there was an opening made by the wind. The opening went away after the wind went away. And that's just one interesting example of how these exclusions could be overcome with proper documentation. Sometimes insurance companies invoke the right to repair. You would really want to have a professional with you to guide you through that, because if they're sending their contractors and telling you what they're going to fix, you want to make sure that that gets done right and that they're following all the rules and requirements for making the repairs at your property. And lastly, one of the things that a lot of associations have trouble with is non-renewals or a cancellation of the policy, and you have a claim that's still open. In those cases, you could work with an attorney to help turn that around, because you definitely have to have insurance when you're operating an association or a business in a commercial building. What are the best things? What are the top 10 things that we can do to prepare and avoid these problems with insurance and insurance claims? And the first thing is, first and foremost, insurance application accuracy. I don't know if you know this, but if you put down the improper information or incorrect information on your policy and you have a claim down the road, the insurance company may not have an obligation to pay you if that misrepresentation or inaccurate statement was material. So for example, what the most common thing that I see is a condominium policy application, and it asks, have you had any prior claims? And if so, have you made the repairs? And people always put, yep, had claims, and yep, I made the repairs. So fast forward to the next storm, they make another claim, and they look at the first of the prior storm and that claim, and they say, okay, well, here's the estimate. Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? And they go through that estimate in detail, and they find things that weren't completed in accordance with the first settlement or the first claim that was presented. So what happens? The insurance company says, well, you lied on your application. You made a misrepresentation. You said you were going to replace all these roofs, and you only replaced half of them and repaired them. That's a misrepresentation. And that could be pretty fatal to your claim. So if you get anything out of this seminar with regard to insurance, make sure that the application of insurance that you guys have is accurate, that what you've represented to the insurance company is correct, because if not, that could prove fatal to a claim down the road. Second, document the condition of the building regularly. A lot of times we'll go and we'll see a lot of water damage or mold in a building, and the insurance companies, they'll look and they'll say, oh, this is pre-existing. This is old damage. This is old deterioration. This has been going on for many years. Well, if you have photographs and videos and mold tests and stuff, you'll be able to know that this is really not the case, and you could prove otherwise. When you have damage to your property, make the needed repairs timely, document them, and keep the invoices, keep the proof, the pictures, the videos that this work was done. This is important when you have a claim down the road, because you'll see this information in the minutes of the meetings, for example, in condominiums, and they'll look through years of minutes of meetings. The insurance companies will start looking for all this information and find it and say, oh, look, they had damage here, they had damage there. Well, you're claiming for that damage again. You're trying to defraud us, or you're trying to get something that wasn't covered, that's not covered under this particular claim, that's something that's unrelated, and that opens you up for a possibility that they deny your claim, at least in part. Associations must keep detailed maintenance records. Photographic and video records are really important. By having these records and having this information, it helps rebut any allegation that the damage being claimed was unrelated to the loss and predated the claim that's being made. Be very mindful of what you put in your condominium meeting minutes. The reason being is because what you put in there, insurance companies are going to see down the road. So if you have a lot of, I've seen a lot of times, hey, we have a really big mold problem. We have to really take care of all this mold that's all over the place. And the reality of it is, it's just basically 1 or 2 units. But when you look at the meeting minutes, the problem looks like widespread throughout the association. Down the road, you have a water damage. A dispute arises as to what has to be done to remediate and to address the mold. They look at these meeting minutes and they say, the insurance company looks at these meeting minutes from 6 months prior, a year prior, 2 years prior, and they're like, wait a minute, you're trying to trick us. You're trying to dupe us. This is a problem that's widespread. This has been here for a really long time. This shouldn't be our problem to pay for. So be very careful of what's put in the meeting minutes regarding, this type of damage. And if there is damage, make sure you put in the meeting minutes that it has been repaired and taken care of once that's done. One of the things that I tell almost every association, hey, should I hire a lawyer? Should I hire an adjuster? Should I hire someone? And if so, when? The answer is yes. When you have a claim, when you have a property damage claim or a concern, it's always best to get professional help to look at it, so that when they are presenting the claim to the insurance company, right from the get-go, it's being presented in the most favorable light. It's being presented in a proper manner, and it's being done in an expeditious manner so as to process the claim more timely and more efficiently, and avoid a lot of the landmines that an inexperienced claimant can fall into or can step on. One of the things that's going to be necessary when you have a claim is to promptly quantify the scope of damage and repairs after a loss. You can't wait. If you have hurricane damage, if you have a water damage loss, and you wait days, weeks, months, and even years, that could compromise your ability to collect on a claim. So when you have damage, you have to report it timely, and you have to quantify it quickly, and accurately, and document it. One of the things that condominiums really should do is, whenever there's a storm or you have a large water loss, is make sure to contact every unit owner before and after to help investigate. Hey, did you have any water in your unit? If so, do you have any pictures, et cetera, et cetera? And then as the process goes, to make sure you document all of the damage. So communication with the unit owners is really good, especially if it's done by email, so it can be done quickly. One of the things that associations should think about today is planning for the future, is having a catastrophe credit line in place. So what is that? An association, a condominium association, can take out a credit line in the event of a hurricane, or have kind of like a safety net, if you will. So let's say Hurricane Bubba comes along next year and causes, a couple $1 million worth of damage. Sometimes to adjust those claims takes months, sometimes years before they're settled. If the association has the money and they properly document and present the claim, they don't have to wait 2, 3, 4 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years to get the money from the insurance company. They have the money, they've documented the claim, their claim professional is fighting with the insurance company to get it, but they can go ahead and make the necessary repairs. There's no need to do an assessment right away, because they have a credit line in place for that, whether it be $500,000, $1 million, whatever it is. They'll have the credit line ready to at least do the important repairs, to put a new roof on the building, to replace the broken windows, to address the damage ASAP, and not have to have the unit owners and the members of the association, suffer through, months and sometimes years of living in a damaged or broken building. And lastly, what's really important is all these associations, particularly condominium and homeowners associations, should have a catastrophe contingency plan in place. If we have a storm, if we have a pipe burst that floods the building, if we have this type of damage, what are we going to do? What can we do? Who's going to be in charge? What's the plan? How are we going to address this so that these problems, these disasters, can be dealt with quickly? There's an expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it's better to take care of this, document the building, document the condition of the building, make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row, and be prepared for a catastrophe. Hopefully you never have one. Hopefully you don't have these, catastrophic fires or water damages or hurricanes or collapses. But if they do happen, the association and the board or the people that are in charge with the property manager can be better prepared to assist. And once again, my name is Andy Fuchsa. I'm an attorney with Geyer Fuchs Tyler. And if you guys have any questions regarding your insurance claims, or anything to do with, property damage involving insurance, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is www.gft.law. And I'd be glad to help any of you with any of these concerns involving insurance.
All right. Let me share the screen here. Thank you, Andy. Andy is an invaluable resource. He knows the ins and outs of this industry. So take advantage of his expertise. He's top of the line here in Florida. Now let's move on here to the questions. I've got a few questions here. We're running a little bit over on time, so we'll try to get to these as quick as possible. Let's see. How is the industry going to change now that this tragedy has happened at Surfside? Andy, you wanna grab that one?
Sure. Well, as far as insurance, I mean that's a two-part question. How's the industry going to change? Well, the first thing is there's going to be a much greater awareness for especially condominiums and condominium, the board members to be proactive and to look at their buildings and really evaluate the buildings to prevent such a tragedy from happening in the future. With regard to insurance, I mean, I don't think the policies are going to change so much, but there is something that a lot of associations are really going to have to look at, which is called typically known as directors and officers liability insurance. So if the association has a board and that board is not making the right decisions and not taking care of the building, they could ultimately be found liable and they could be sued for their malfeasance, for not acting properly. There's insurance to protect the association if the directors and officers are not doing the right thing. And many associations are going to speak with their insurance agents and make sure that they're adequately protected. What could happen a lot is you have an association, you have a board, and they know a problem. They know, hey, we have this this rust, we have this spalling, we have this deterioration, we have this decay, we have this problem with the roof, and they don't do anything because they don't want to assess anyone. They don't want to spend the money. They don't want to they don't want to take care of this problem. And it's like a cancer, it begins to grow. And over time, that could result in a catastrophic event. We had Hurricane Irma come by in 2017. There's a lot of associations that sustain damage, especially to the roofs. And, they're fighting with their insurance companies and so on and so forth. But if they don't take care of it, if they don't mitigate damages, if they don't say, you know what, even if the insurance company is not paying us, we need to take action and we need to do the work. Because if they don't, what could happen is, regardless of whether the insurance company pays you or not, you could have a terrible situation where a deluge of water could come in, or you could have other problems that arise that could put people's life safety at risk. So directors and officers liability insurance is something that a lot of associations are going to look at, but more importantly, the associations, the boards are going to have to spend a lot more time and a lot more effort making sure that their buildings are safe. That's what's going to change. And hopefully whether we have, instead of, like you said, 40-year inspections, we may have 30 or 20-year inspections. We may have inspections that require physical testing, but a lot more has to be done. So what happened at Surfside never, ever happens again.
Thank you, Andy. And I want to just say something that I've been involved in 2 cases as an expert witness where the associations and the board members have been held liable for not doing, for example, and the 2 ones that I've been involved in has been because of spalling and concrete issues. One where a piece of spall fell on a car, damaged the car, and another one where it unfortunately hit somebody on the head. They were sitting in their balcony, and the association was sued. And it was basically because they knew for years that this kind of thing was happening, and they failed to do something. So anyway, I've got another question here. Are painters required to fill the cracks when painting? The short answer is yes, and they definitely should. So why are you going to paint and not fill in cracks? Because the water's going to get in. The water's going to get in anyway, and that's why you paint the buildings. Either way, you probably won't get a warranty from Sherwin-Williams or Behr or whoever you use, and less even from the contractor if you leave cracks open. So the answer is yes. Can waterproofing the roof help in preventing water damage? Waterproofing and roof are two different things. You waterproof a wall, you waterproof a floor, you don't waterproof roofs. Roofs get roofing. So the question really doesn't make sense, but you should be able to do maintenance to your roof, to the existing system. Hire a good roofer that will provide maintenance. And of course, you're saving yourself 9 stitches when you can do one in the beginning. What is the difference between a 40, 50, and 60-year recertification? The inspections are exactly the same form, same questions, same everything. The only difference is if your building turns 40, it's a 40-year recertification. If your building turns 50, it's a 50-year recertification. That's the only difference. Next, can we ask the association to request another inspection even if the building already has the 40 and 50-year inspection? The short answer is you can ask for anything. The board members have a fiduciary duty to make sure that everything is safe in the building and that things are running correctly and protecting the residents' interests. So you can ask for anything. The question is there a good enough reason to spend the additional money? And if you have that concern, you should voice that concern in one of your board meetings, which they typically have regularly, typically every month. So a lot of people don't go to these board meetings because of apathy. They don't know, but if you're really concerned about your building, you should be involved in your association and go to these meetings because they really are important. The other thing is the 40-year or 50-year inspection to include pool leaks, or does that need to be added on? Some say that the template is for inspections and is a generic template. Pool leaks, any kind of leaks, are not included necessarily in the 40-year certification. 40-year certifications is basically for life safety issues, electrical issues that can kill somebody, and structural issues that can kill somebody. Nobody's ever died of a leak falling on top of their head or of an air conditioner that wasn't working. Those types of things are outside the scope. So no, pools are not, but there are plenty of professionals out there who specialize in pools, who specialize in drainage issues and things of that sort. So seek those professionals, like I said before in this webinar. And we have another question here that says, once an issue is documented, whether in a 40-year or a 50-year, is there a required time period that the building must address and cure the issue? I think that it's a 90-day window that they give you, but having been on the board of unsafe structures and been in the game for a long time, I can tell you categorically that as long as the building department and the building official sees that you're making progress, whether it's, hey, I hired an engineer, or hey, I'm getting plans done, as long as they see that there's progress, they will basically lay off of you, okay? And you can ask your engineer, and I've done this many times. I've written letters on behalf of my clients saying, look, these people, they've hired me. Can you give us another 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? The worst thing that you can do, the worst thing by far, is to ignore them. Because once you ignore them and they feel like they're being ignored, then that's when they start to come down with the fines. That's when you start getting nasty letters in the mail. And then we have another question. In an event happens and I'm forced out of the building by the fire department during repairs, will insurance cover temporary housing and expenses? Andy.
Well, the answer is yes. If you have insurance, typically that's called additional living expense. And most policies will cover it. So for example, if you have a fire in part of a building and you're in another part of the building, even though your unit was not affected by the fire, but you're required to relocate, your insurance policy will cover it. Now, the association will not, and it typically doesn't have an obligation to pay for that. That's why you should have renter's insurance if you're renting, and if you're residing there as in a condominium or an apartment that you own, like a townhome, you should always have additional living expense coverage for your particular unit.
Okay, we have one more question. This one's for you, Andy. How do we force the board of directors of the association to provide documents? I have sent certified return receipt letters requesting documents, and we have received nothing.
Well, see, that's kind of depends what kind of documents, because there are some documents that, don't, like, for example, litigation documents and such, those don't, there's no requirement for the board to provide those. But if you do have an issue with your association board, that you think that you're being wronged or something's going on, the best thing to do is really to consult a condominium attorney. Our area of practice, again, is insurance claims. There are many lawyers who specialize simply in condominium matters, and they could probably give you the best guidance on that.
And we're running over on time. We have several questions, but I think this is going to be the last one. But before Andy answers the question, I want to just say thank you everybody for attending. And you see, you can go to, if you have an engineering question, construction question, please get a hold of us at askgbatista.com, and you can call the office at 954-434-2053. We will put that on the on the video as it goes through. So, and then Andy, you can answer this last question, and then you can tell the people how they can get a hold of you. It says here, where is it? Okay. No, this one, the townhouse one. Okay. Okay, I have a townhouse and the balcony seems to have water damage. There are cracks and softening of the concrete that is noticeable. I filed a claim before with the insurance and they sent someone to inspect. They told me that it just needed paint. That was 2 years ago. I painted and even replaced the tile, but it's getting worse. How do I approach another claim in this for the same issue?
All right, well, based on the facts that you're telling me, unfortunately, that is a claim that is probably not going to be covered under your policy. Insurance as a whole, so you understand, it covers sudden and accidental events, things that were unforeseen that all of a sudden happen. Insurance is not intended to cover maintenance related or wear and tear related issues. So all buildings have wear and tear, all buildings have deterioration and such. And if that's the only thing that's going on, there's no other event like a hurricane or a fire or a pipe that breaks, it typically wouldn't be covered. So in your particular case, what really should be done is to look at what's causing that damage and make sure that it's sealed so you don't get any more water intrusion. What you really need in that case is not necessarily to file an insurance claim, but to hire a contractor or an engineer to help you how to tell you how to fix that problem in an expeditious manner so it doesn't get more and more expensive as time go on and then become a real problem down the road.
So how do people get in touch with you, Andy, in case they want to ask more questions?
All right, so if anybody's interested in learning a little bit about our company and what we could do for them with regard to insurance claims, the easiest thing is to go on our website. It has all our phone numbers and contact information, and it's really simple. It's gft.law, www.g like George, F like Frank, T like Thomas, .law, law. We'd love to help you if you have a claim and you need someone to help guide you through it. We're there for you, and we'd like to be able to be a pretty valuable resource for any of those that are out there that that need it.
I am Greg Batista, and I want to thank Danny, who was the technical guy here doing everything and behind the scenes. And I want to especially thank Andy Fuchsa for being available for this. You're a valuable resource. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. And we will be bothering you with one more email, which will be sending you a link that you can see this thing on YouTube. And if you guys thought that this was valuable information, I would really appreciate that you can send this link to other people. I think that we did a pretty good job in at least giving you the basics so that you at least can go from here on out. So again, have a good night, everybody, and take care.